Chris Graham here on the podcast, and we're going to do what I promised to do here on the UVA basketball podcast. Later in the show, we'll talk about the what I call the seamy underbelly of UVA basketball recruiting. But first, we'll get you ready for the Virginia Tech game tomorrow night as I'm recording. I'm recording on Tuesday night. Uh, what Virginia basketball fans need to know about Virginia Tech. This one surprised me a little bit when I looked at the standings of the ACC. This would be the 8-9 game in the ACC tournament if the season ended right now, which, of course, there's a lot of basketball still to be played, 15 games in the regular season still to go. So that's a ways off. In here now, the first game is tomorrow night. Both these teams are 2-3 in the ACC. Both have lost three of their last four games. Virginia's three of the last four, maybe a little more significant, all of them double-digit losses. All on the road. Virginia Tech has lost three of its last four. Its most recent loss, a 75-71 loss to Miami at home, where they had to play without Hunter Couture. So that's pretty significant. Talk about the Virginia Tech rotation for UVA fans who haven't been paying attention. There's a guy that you've probably assumed was a senior 2 years ago, Sean Padula. He's just been playing since he was a freshman. He's only a junior. And 16.1 points a game, 4.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists per game, 38.9% from three. You got to watch him from three. Feels like he's been around forever, but he's just a junior. Lynn Kidd, the second leading scorer on this team. Now, he has been at Virginia Tech for a while. He transferred from Clemson after 1 year. He's been at Virginia Tech for 3 years, but you hadn't heard his name much because he only played 2.5 minutes a game as a sophomore, 12.6 minutes a game last year. This year, he's a force, 14.8 points, 7.1 rebounds, 67.2% from the floor. 6'10 senior, big guy who can score in the post. Got to watch out for him. He's gone for double digits in 12 of his 16 games, but two of his last three, he's been in single digits. And he was 8 for 8 in the Miami game for 16 points. You got to watch out for him. He can be a little streaky, but generally he's been playing pretty well. I was going to say the aforementioned Hunter Couture, the other member of that really good backcourt. He is a senior. Hunter Couture, his status is unknown for tomorrow night. As of when I was checking it earlier today, 13.5 points a game, 41.1% from three. He missed the game with Miami after getting injured in the first half of the Clemson game, a win for Virginia Tech, 87-72 at home last week, diving for a loose ball on the floor, inadvertently got kicked in the head by a Clemson player. Missed the last game with the head injury, and Mike Young saying that Couture's status for tomorrow night is still unknown, at least as of yesterday. That was as of the ACC teleconferences yesterday. I had not seen any updates today suggesting anything one way or the other. The rest of the rotation for Virginia Tech, a guy named Tyler Nickel, who is from my way here, East Rockingham High School, just about 30 minutes north of me. He was a four-star prep recruit for North Carolina, was there for a year, didn't play much, transferred to Virginia Tech. He's started about, I think he started 11 games, but he's been a sixth man a lot in ACC play, 9.1 points a game, 38.2% from three, I should say. 6'7" kid who can play both guard and forward. The other regular starters are a 6'4" sophomore named MJ Collins and a Northwestern grad transfer, Robbie Barron. Uh, Both guys who are more role players. Barron is a 6'9" guy, gets some rebounds for you. Two other rotation guys to mention here. Miloljal Potit. God, I'm probably butchering that name. I've not heard it pronounced. 4.9 points a game off 66 points, 66.0% from the field, 6'9" senior. And an ODU transfer from Mekhi Long, 4.1 points and 5.2 rebounds per game. And then there's one more guy, might not play. Brandon Rechsteiner, a 6'1" freshman guard, actually got a lot of potential. 2.6 points, 1.9 assists in 12.3 minutes a game. Doesn't get a lot of playing time in ACC and Power 5 games. I mentioned Rechsteiner because his dad is the wrestler Scott Steiner. The Steiners, him and his brother Rick, their actual last name is Rex Steiner. They shortened it for wrestling purposes. And so Brandon, the point guard, 6'1" point guard, 6'1", 185 point guard, is the son of Scott, Big Papa Pump. And then he's also the cousin of Bron Breaker. NXT wrestling. Braun Breakers, the former Bronson Rechsteiner, had a cup of coffee, barely, but he was a member of the Baltimore Ravens for a brief time after college ball, and then he moved into the family business, and he's doing really well as Braun Breaker in WWE. So holla if you hear me as far as that goes. How Virginia matches up in this one, I'll be curious to see how Tony Bennett matches up lineup and rotation wise here. Last week he started two bigs in the game with Wake Forest. I should say just a few days ago, the loss to Wake Forest. But Mike Young, the Virginia Tech coach, he does start Barron at 6'9" and Kidd at 6'10", and then he uses Poteet at 6'9". But when you add up the numbers per game, they get a total of 60 minutes per game. That suggests that 15 to 20 minutes, maybe more, go to a smaller lineup. When you think about the 4 and 5 positions, if you were playing 40 minutes each, it'd be 80 minutes. They're giving up 20 or more minutes a game, some games, to a 4 guard, one forward, power forward, center lineup. So I'm not sure that you'll see Tony Bennett necessarily go big in this game. His favorite starting lineup has been 4 guards around the 6'9" stretch for Jake Groves. He did see Jordan Minor. Bennett did start Jordan Minor in the Wake game, and Minor played well. 22 minutes, his longest action of the season, 9 points, 5 rebounds. Didn't give up a basket. 0 for 2 shooting in one-on-one defense. So he played great defense, which was a question. That's why he's been kept off the floor a lot. Is the grad transfer adjusting to the Virginia Packline defense. Minor played well in that role. I'll still expect him to probably come off the bench in this one, but get a good minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes in this game. Because Groves doesn't get a lot of minutes. He starts, but he doesn't generally get a lot of minutes. I think he had 34 minutes in one of the games. Was it maybe the Louisville game a couple weeks ago? But you'll see him more in the 15 to 20 minute range, even as a starter. I would expect again to see Minor probably getting a good amount of minutes, and he might start. Might because Kidd is a, you might want to set the tone with Kidd, being a guy who's 60+% shooter in the post, gets a lot of points, gets a lot of rebounds. You might want to set a tone by focusing on your defense at the start of the game. It'll be important for Reese Beekman to stay out of foul trouble. Reese had a couple of fouls in the first half, limited his minutes, got an early third foul in the second half that put him on the bench as Virginia was on the back end of the other end of a run by Wake Forest and ultimately put the game away. Also, in serious need of bounce back games on Wednesday, Isaac McNeely, who was 2 for 10 from the floor in the Wake loss. Ryan Dunn, 4 points and just 1 rebound in 23 minutes, I think it was. So got to see more out of Ryan Dunn. He's a projected first round pick, a potential lottery pick, and he's averaging less than points a game for this team. Need to see a lot more out of him if Virginia's going to get the same turnaround. One last thing we'll talk about: postseason implications for this game for both sides. It's a borderline must win for both teams. It's more for Virginia, but Virginia Tech too. Virginia's 63rd in today's updated net rankings, the rankings that are the predominant metric that the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee will use. Just 1 quad win to date. That was the win over Florida earlier in the year. Tech is 52nd in the net, 3 quad 1 wins. Boise State, Iowa State, and Clemson. A win for the Hokies would be a 4th quad 1 win. They're on the road. So Virginia at the 63 would be a quad 1 win for Virginia Tech. And for Virginia, this will be a quad 2 game. Virginia is only 1-0 in quad 2 games right now. So that's the breakdown for tomorrow. That tip-off is at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. It's in JPJ. The game is broadcast on ESPNU. And, of course, I'll be there. And live blogging, in a sense, one of the website will be doing a live coverage thing on the AFP website where I'll generally update every TV timeout, and then at halftime with a longer update, just kind of what I'm thinking during the game, what I'm noticing, that kind of thing. So it's worth following. I think it's fun for me to write anyway. So that's where we stand with UVA Virginia Tech. Now, okay, so I promised this one yesterday. I came out of the witness protection program, hadn't done a podcast in a couple of weeks, and I did one yesterday, and I did not address the big story I wrote over the weekend. And I honestly feel it's weird. I feel, I mean, the journalist in me is very happy that I wrote this story. The fan in me, maybe not so much, just because, I mean, I wrote about something. The story was titled "Tweet from NIL Booster Exposes the Seamy Underbelly of UVA Basketball Recruiting." And this doesn't make me happy, but we'll go into the story, and then I also wanted to go into a nice back and forth I had with a reader who had some critical points to make, and then I answered, and we'll see how that goes. There were lots of comments on the story. I would say mostly I want to say positive because I don't care for a pat on the back, but mostly people appreciating that this was a difficult story to write and it had to be written. There were your also people who would prefer to see me burned at a stake, and that's okay. That's how things go in this day and age. Um, it was a difficult story because well, I'll kind of tell it as I told it in the column that I wrote. Got a text sent to me. It was from a D1 college assistant last week, as it turns out, now because I wrote this on Sunday. And it was a link to a tweet that troubled this assistant. And then when I saw the tweet, it kind of troubled me too. And this was before, now, it was about NIL. And this was before the news came out about Florida State on Friday having the hammer put down on the FSU football program by the NCAA or something that was sort of similar. So that's when it really hit the need to write about part of the story for me. Um, what was sent to me was a link to a tweet from a Richmond businessman named Jonathan Cotton, who owns more than 20 Good Feet store franchises in Virginia and throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. Pretty successful guy. He's also made himself a very visible UVA Athletics money guy. And he touts his status on his Twitter feed, which is an awful lot of running commentaries, at least until the last couple of days, on current events in UVA athletics, photos showing his inside access to the programs, especially the basketball program. Recently, there was a courtside snap of Tony Bennett that obviously he would have had to have taken from, I mean, sitting right beside the guy to practice. Another snap of the men's lacrosse coach Lars Tiffany at the Aberdeen barn, where Tiffany was given a pep talk with some heavy hitters, heavy money hitters of support UVA athletics. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's how the world goes around. And Cotton, who's a graduate of West Navajo High School and Piedmont, Virginia Community College, he's living every hardcore UVA fan's dream. I mean, give the guy credit, right? The tweet in question wasn't, the snapshots and the, braggadocio. It was a reply that he posted on January 9th. So we're talking about a week ago from when I'm recording this podcast. That was a reply to a tweet that was from Who's Got Next, an account associated with the Locker Room Access blog. Locker Room Access is a blog and a podcast that was co-founded by Justin Anderson and Ty Jerome, obviously UVA Hoops alums, both first-round picks. This tweet from Jonathan Cotton kind of felt like it was at least towing the line and maybe stepping a little bit over. Here's the tweet. To say that Tony and his staff does not embrace NIL is not at all true. He does not lead with it. He has specifically used our company in recruiting trips, and Kyle Getter told me he also did when recruiting. So he being Tony Bennett, specifically used our company in recruiting trips, and Kyle Getter, who's a former UVA assistant, who's now at Notre Dame, told me he did also when recruiting. So this was a response to it. This was the text of the post from Who's Got Next that appeared to have set Jonathan Cotton off. The tweet from Who's Got Next was UVA basketball players do pretty well on average with NIL, from what I understand. It just isn't used as a recruiting inducement at all. And by refusing to play that game, it does take recruits off the board, especially in the transfer market. Now, I mean, the problem with that tweet from Who's Got Next, which again is associated with Ty Jerome and Justin Anderson, is NIL cannot be used as a recruiting inducement. It can't be. That's what Florida State got its hand slapped for. And hand slapped, including the football program can't associate with its leading NIL collective for a year because of what happened there. What it seemed like Jonathan Cotton was trying to say in his response was, sorry, you got it wrong. Bennett does play the NIL game, and I know because he uses me in recruiting. You can't you can't use NIL as an inducement. Lots of people have commented on this story, which is because lots of people read the story. There have been quite a few people who commented to say, well, everybody does it. Well, we don't know everybody does it. There are rules, and you assume that everybody plays by the rules. Florida State was not playing by the rules. They got caught. I mean, in addition to not being able to associate with the NIL collective for a year, Florida State football will be without its offensive coordinator for the first 3 games of next season. They lose some scholarships, they lose some on-campus visits. There's a 2-year probation. Anything else happens, this was a level 2 violation. One time, one player, one football player, a guy from Georgia, offensive lineman from Georgia who was looking to transfer, visited Florida State, was driven over to the NIL collective by the offensive coordinator, just and was offered 15,000 a month to transfer. Um, Now, nothing that Jonathan Cotton said in his tweet says anybody was ever offered any money, but it says, I mean, he says this. He specifically used our company in recruiting. He being Tony Bennett. That's what Jonathan Cotton said. So if he's saying if what Jonathan Cotton is saying is Tony Bennett says he uses our name in recruiting. If that's all he said, okay, that's probably fine. It still feels a little pushing the bounds, but it's probably fine. What you're supposed to say is if you come to play at our school, there are NIL opportunities and you'll make whatever you think you're worth on the NIL market. You'll have your opportunities here. That's what you're supposed to say if you're a coach. You're not supposed to do what Florida State did, which is drive a guy over to talk to the NIL guy who says 15,000 a month, what you'll get. And so it's not quite that Jonathan Cotton is saying that Tony Bennett drove kids over, but it just feels a little icky. Um, so where to go with this? There's nothing. I mean, what's different about FSU and Jonathan Cotton again is there's no smoking gun. There's nothing about a substantive offer to a recruit. I mean, but there's a hint that there's something more going on than just, hey, I'm here supporting the program. Um, what Cotton played up in his tweet was the more nebulous notion that Bennett has, quote, used Cotton's company. And he's leaving open to interpretation what used means. You want to believe that what he meant by the word used is Bennett telling recruits if you sign an NLI, which is a national letter of intent, then there are NIL opportunities for you at UVA, and Good Feet Store is one of them. But where this really bothered me is not with Jonathan Cotton. He's a super fan with money who's buying access. He gets to go to practice. He gets to sit there with Tony, and Tony regales him with stories, and that's great. I mean, that's hey, and any of you watching this right now, if you were had the money to blow, you'd a lot you would blow it on hanging out with Tony Bennett at practice. And if the cost to do that was to sponsor a UVA athlete, even better, right? I mean, hey, then now your UVA athletes helping sponsor your business or whatever. They're talking about your whatever you're doing on social media. So I mean, that gosh, sign me up for that. If I had the money, you'd do it, right? So nothing against Cotton and really nothing against Tony Bennett, but it just, I was probably just naive. I just assumed that Tony was above all that. Engaging directly in NIL like this. I mean, yeah, he's got to, if you want to play the game, you got to play it the way it's played. And you got to mention that there's an NIL collective at UVA, Cab Futures would be the name of that NIL collective. It just feels like if he's mentioning Good Feed Store and Jonathan Cotton is saying he did, I haven't had anybody. That story was written, I mean, 48 hours ago at this stage, written and posted 48 hours ago at this stage. Um, Jonathan Cotton hasn't gotten to me and said I was overstating what I said in that tweet. No one from UVA Athletics has gotten in touch with me. They do if they think I got something wrong, to say you got something wrong there, fix it. That's disappointing too, because what it means is, it's pretty much what was said here, I think, at this stage. I wanted to believe that Tony was just out recruiting good character kids who wanted to come to UVA. And then if there's NIL money, hey, even better. But if not, or if there's not as much NIL money as I could possibly get going somewhere else, I get a UVA degree. I get to play for Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett puts a lot of guys in the NBA, and the five pillars are important to me and my family. That's what I was hoping, and I can't unsee this now. And I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of the folks who commented on the story, they can't unsee it now either. I mean, I hate that this is the case. I have, of course, like anybody else in the media, and maybe a lot of people not in the media, I've got Google News alerts set up from Augusta Free Press and some other things, other search terms, and the Duke basketball report linked to the story, and not just linked to it, but wrote about it, and talked about the image of Tony Bennett being tarnished. Now that means I tarnished Tony's image because I wrote this story. Um, that's part of it. I mean, but it's my job. You can't. I mean, my job as a journalist is not to just see things and accept them. Uh, you got to sometimes write about things that are uncomfortable. So I told you I would uh, do a point counterpoint. I was trying to set something up with a reader who had emailed with a counterpoint, and we just couldn't connect today. So I'm going to use another reader's objections, so to speak, and it was a friendly objection. Is fine. It was good stuff, and I wrote back, and then he wrote back, and I wrote back again, just to kind of point out there is another side of the story and see what was said. This writer, and I'll give his name Ryan S. I don't want to out him too much, and I took some of the stuff out that would maybe more identify Ryan, in case he didn't want to be identified any more than that, because his points were more important than identifying him. He said, "I want to understand this article from you. Did you not think our coaches talked to recruits about NIL opportunities? I'm not sure that would be even possible not to. Tony Bennett wouldn't get a three-star kid to attend UVA without that conversation. That doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong, but yes, a three or four-star kid should know that once he signs an NLI, very shortly thereafter, he will get a call from our collective connecting him with multiple NIL opportunities. Um, that's just the world today. Did you not think that was happening? I've been critical of Tony Bennett the last few years for results, but I felt that article was unfair to him. If he wasn't playing the game, I'd suggest he wasn't doing his job. The FSU situation, Ryan says, was different in that they were basically promising specific payouts to high school recruits. And it was actually a college transfer recruit, but point well taken. Fairly certain that it isn't happening, but I'd imagine they're at least letting the recruit know generally what type of opportunities he will have. So my response to that was, and Ryan will have a chance to respond back. To me, it was one thing to relate to a kid. Of course, if you come to school here, we do NIL. Because not everybody, I mean, if you're going to play a mid-major, who knows if JMU does has an NIL collective, and if they do, that could be that lucrative. We at UVA, Power 5, ACC, we do have NIL. We have a collective. It's another thing in tone of line to be specific about a booster to me, a specific booster. This isn't, I mean, from what Jonathan Cotton wrote in his tweet, this wasn't Tony saying, yes, we have a collective. This was Jonathan Cotton saying, Tony says the Good Feet store is one of our major sponsors and you'll have an opportunity with them. That's what he was saying. That comes across to me as risking sounding like offering an inducement. This is where it gets to me. And I mean, this what really I think this gets to is likely it's even if it's nothing, the guy in the tweets is basically inviting the NCAA to come in and check. And that's not what this is about. The rules are the rules. NIL cannot be an inducement to attend. And if I'm wrong in pointing that out, I'm glad to be wrong. Again, it's a job. It's my job as a journalist, and not everybody takes, especially in sports writing, takes the job that seriously. They used the term jock sniffer in an article this weekend. That's what it feels like to me. Too much that goes on in this day and age, both in journalism and in everything else in sports. So Ryan's response, and this is again, Ryan's a pretty smart guy. I wish I could tell you more about Ryan. Lots of inside knowledge. I really appreciate that you read and respond. I totally agree that such a tweet isn't very smart, even if the program is doing everything within the lines. Why even put out the notion they may not be? My understanding is you cannot guarantee pay for play, but all these guys have an NIL valuation, and that's true. And there are companies I should correct because he did the wrong there, and I got to correct a couple things here. Our companies that the universities can hire to be the go-between and marketing arm, and yeah, guys have agents. The collectives are go-betweens. The NCAA is actually tweaking its rules to allow the schools to more directly work with the collectives, kind of like how politics works. I also am a politics writer, and a campaign can raise its own money, and then there's a super PAC that raises money on behalf of supporting the candidate, but they can't coordinate, even though we kind of know that they probably do, but they can't. Um, a similar thing with collectives and athletics programs, and they're going to try to streamline those rules. It's a Wild West. By having an NIL collective marketing firm, I believe the program can refer the kid to them, and then they can talk with the kid about his valuation and what he can expect from the university's collective. Um, so what I wrote back to Ryan, as I guess we're getting ready to wrap up here. What I don't like about the story, this is me speaking, it involves a guy claiming that he knows Tony Bennett is using his company, not the NIL collective, to appeal to athletes. If that's true, whether it's an NCAA violation, it's to me, and maybe it's just me. I think there's a few people who agree, but and it didn't matter. It's just to me that's a ethical and moral breach, even if it's not an NCAA violation. Basically, what's going on here, it feels to me, is Tony is helping the Good Feet store guy sell his shoe inserts to get kids to commit, and I mean that's not right. At the least, the tweet opened the door to something that could be less or could be more than what the guy at the Good Feet store is claiming it to be. And this is going to sound mean, but I think it's accurate. Um, the Good Feet store guy would be best advised to stop tweeting that way. But my assumption is he spends that money to be able to put himself over. I'm using a wrestling term there, more than he spends it to benefit UVA athletics. And that might be mean, but it also feels very true. Um, there are people who do good things for the right reasons, and then there are people who do good things so that they can tell people they do good things. And so this is a difficult story, but I think it's one that needed to be told. If you have any questions or comments, you want to blast me. The YouTube comment section, there's a comment section, I'm sure, on whatever podcast app you're using. And if not, you want to just tell me directly so you know that I see it. I see everything, by the way. I mean, the YouTube comments come to me too. So, but anyway, the other way to get to me would be to email me at chris@augustafreepress.com. One last reminder, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, tomorrow night being Wednesday night, because you might be listening to this Wednesday during the day. So Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Virginia Tech on ESPNU. I'll be doing live coverage. So if you're watching the game on TV and you want to, for some reason, want to know what I'm thinking during the game, you can go to Augusta Free Press. There will be a live coverage link on the website, on the front page of the website, under the sports section, and you can follow along. Thanks for listening, everybody.